Welcome to the Ask Me How I Know podcast, the only podcast in the multifamily niche replicating what takes place outside the walls of a seminar. This is like the lobby, where honest, unscripted conversations take place and transformation happens. We'll talk about practical problem solving in the multifamily niche, as well as overcoming limiting beliefs. Thank you for joining us today, and now for our featured guest. Ask Me How I Know, multifamily investment stories of struggle to success. And today we have somebody who is absolutely fantastic. I wish you could hear all the pre-conversations that we have because they're really fun, right? But today we have Colby Bowers with us. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for being on Ask Me How I Know, but also he's served our country in the through the Air Force, and that's a significant contribution. Anyone who knows people who have served our country, thank you for doing that and serving us. And I love that it also serves other people around the world. But you have an interesting progression of where you've been and where you're going. So I don't know, before I jump in there, is there anything that you would like to say to start off? I'll pass it over to you.
No, well, I appreciate it, Julie. It's a pleasure to be invited onto your podcast. I'm really excited to be here, and um, yeah, it's always fun to be able to kind of talk about my experiences and where I've been and where we're going, and and that's I hope it helps inspire somebody else to take some action and do their dream, follow their dreams.
I have no doubt that it will. So when we were talking beforehand, listeners, you didn't get to hear this part, but we found out that we both share this similarity of living in Colorado, and my family was started in Denver, and he was at an Air Force base in Aurora, just a neighboring community, and lived in the same area in Longmont, where, if you don't mind me saying all this, like, it's so cool. Sometimes when we figure out that geography, it's like that people can relate to that, and they're like, oh my gosh, hey, I know people there. That's my favorite place, favorite airport, everybody, right? I love DIA, Terminal B. But in that process, I noticed that you now live in Steamboat Springs. You know what? Should we not? Do you want me to edit that out? I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
fine.
I'm
It's
like,
all over our website. It's our mailing address. And
I'm like, some people remember I live in far north Idaho. Do you know anything about far north Idaho? It's a lot of it's a lot of preppers and a lot of people that want to be like all secretive and private. And so I'm always trying to be like, oh wait, who am I speaking with? So anyway, no, sorry.
No, I
So
have my tinfoil at home.
okay, yeah, we're comfortable people also. So we were talking, and I noticed that you are investing outside of the Colorado scene, and I'm wondering, you've had some challenges that have come up with that, and you've had to do a lot of legwork to make that dream a reality. So I'm curious, like, what made you leave that market? First of all, like, why?
Yes.
Denver's
Well,
hot.
it's an expensive market. Uh, I when we first started this a couple years ago, my partner, we looked in our backyard. We looked in Denver. The MSA, looked all around Colorado, and two things really stuck out. Is one is the cap rates were so compressed. Everything was at a premium. A Class C, value add was trading at a sub 5 cap rate, and it had been value added like 4 times. So there's no meat on the bone, and the competition. There's a lot of folks, a lot of investors and institutional investors that are in these hotter markets. They have deep pockets, so it's easier for them to win out bids. They can pay more because they can pay more down. So they have a lot more advantages and stuff. So we just realized that it wasn't going to work for us, and so we took our time. We took about 6 months or so and really looked around the nation of going, hey, what's out there? What interests us? And I think, my partner and I, both being military, we're not we're not afraid of travel. We're not afraid of long distance. I think because that's just how, my life was for 23 years is, cool. If I want to go somewhere, I had to get on a plane or do something. So it wasn't scary to do long distance stuff. And so we settled on Arkansas. Demographics, plus it helped that we had a few friends there, and um, it's been great. There's less competition. It's not a get rich quick market, and that's none of our markets because we just look at it as steady long term cash flow. We write very conservatively to make sure that the next downturn, when it comes, just whenever it's coming, just win.
Right around the corner.
Yeah, and so we look at long term. Our holds are a lot longer, and it's we align ourselves with partners and investors that have that same mentality. So,
Yeah.
and it's been working great for us.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I had a conversation with a potential investor this week, and we were talking about the goals that investor had, and the appreciation had no bearing on that did not change their desire to invest at all. And I know a lot of people want to catch that tailwind and like, okay, we're going to get the appreciation and, just like kind of accelerate some of our, appreciation and everything. But this person is like, man, as long as we've got cash flow, I'm happy. And so we're, looking into some of the markets in a similar way, Missouri and such, where it's like, oh, well, it's inexpensive. You're not going to appreciate much, but you got great cash flow. Yeah.
And there's still good quality properties. A lot of people associate good cash flow with a Class D property, or being a slumlord. In the hotter markets, yes, like in Denver, if you find something that cash flows well, chances are it's probably not in the best neighborhood. It's probably 1950s and probably has 1960s decor still, and there's probably outlines of chalk marks on the outside. It's probably high on the crime, but you can find some of these smaller tertiary markets and get into B and C class properties that will perform well and still cash flow. And then we look at the appreciation, and any appreciation that we can do, whether it's forced appreciation by going in and doing some renovations, or if it's just holding on to it, that the appreciation is icing on the cake for us. So
that's awesome. Well, you found yourself you'd mentioned that you had to really develop a lot of legwork in getting yourself, some credibility in those markets. And I know that a lot of investors are facing this right now. A lot of, it's like, in fact, even my husband and I, we're taking a trip in a few weeks out to our target market, in Alabama. And, it's like doing that legwork to get some rapport and some respect, some cred. So tell us about some of the little painful process.
Well, yeah, as you know, I mean, anything just, long distance real estate is like long distance relationship. It's, it has its challenges. One of the things that we've committed to that is not easy for a lot of people to do is I fly out monthly. So each month I fly out to our target market and our target region, because we're kind of expanding in our area. And I hold a meetup. So I'm in there. I'm meeting with with other like-minded potential investors, folks that know the market. I've learned more about the market and demographics in my meetup than I have talking with brokers or doing research online. I was making a bunch of phone calls to brokers about 6 or 8 months before we actually committed to me flying out there monthly. I was trying to build relationships, and I wasn't making a lot of headway. But my first trip out there, meeting with the brokers face to face, not only they're like, okay, this guy isn't just, you got to figure most of these brokers, they're probably getting multiple calls a day from people kicking tires. Yeah. So they're calling it out, and they're not really serious, but they see
this overall loop on the LoopNet.
Yeah. Hey, can you send me your off-market deals? I want to get on your mailer. And, they're like, whatever. They don't take you seriously until they see that you're committed. And once I started going out there, every time I go to my market, I'm meeting with all my brokers, taking them up, for coffee, lunch, dinner, whatever, however I can, even if it's just swinging by their office and just saying hi, so once I started doing that, we started really getting more good deals. I'd get some deals sent to me, and I was like, okay, they're just testing. These are, they were sending me their crap deals. The ones that weren't selling, the ones that are on LoopNet. I'm like, yeah, I saw this on LoopNet too. So,
Maybe he'll pick the bait. Maybe he'll go for this one.
right. But what I also do, and is every time a broker, whether it's no matter what the deal is, always respond back. So I always, hey, thank you for the consideration, but it doesn't meet our criteria. And then I'll send what our criteria, hey, we're looking for Class C, B, no flat roofs, 1980s or newer, 20 to 75 units. We'll look at anything higher, bam, this is kind of what, kind of a thing. Hey, this doesn't meet it because, it's a little too old for our taste, or it's not enough doors, or it's too many doors, so. And or if it fits that criteria, is we'll go back and be like, hey, we underwrote this, but we think, and we try not to go out and come across as going, well, your deal's overpriced, because that doesn't, because what's overpriced to me may not be overpriced to another investor. Right. So we just kind of keep it professional, just going, hey, thank you again. This deal doesn't meet our investment criteria. Really like looking at it. It's a nice property, but we can't come close to the asking price. And and we won't even put offers if we know it's going to be really low, or they're unrealistic. We just go, hey, keep us in mind for the next one.
No LOI, nothing, just next, move on.
Yeah, I'll do next and move on, but like I'll just send a blurb off to the broker, so at least they know that I'm looking, and that we have a rhyme or reason. So what is our criteria? What's our thinking? What's our investment? And really, and that it does two things. One is it shows the broker that we're serious, we're taking a look, but it also helps them realize what our criteria is. Yeah. So when that deal that we would like comes across his desk or their desk, he or she is like, oh, hey, let me send this over to Colby, because this seems more in line with the feedback he's been given. So, so that's where the benefit of doing that and always giving that feedback.
Yeah, but and a lot of that is, basically you're continually advertising yourself as well. That whole owning somebody's mental market share, like constantly, reiterating this is our criteria. Here's our criteria. It's like it's programming their brain. As soon as they see that, they're gonna be like, yep, I know who this goes to.
Absolutely. And then I invite, also we have a local attorney. I have a local lender. In offices at the broker, so I invite them to come speak at the meetup. So that they like that, because they're like, oh, they feel, hey, they feel appreciated, and then it's free advertising for them. So it's almost like, I'm kind of doing them a favor. And I one is because I don't want to talk at all my meetups. I always get somebody else besides me, standing up in front of the group. So it helps me out. But then also, the other side is, maybe they'll be like, hey, Colby's really been taking care of me. We haven't offered him a deal, or haven't, he hasn't, but every time he's in town, I get invites, I go to his meetups or whatever. Man, I really want to do a deal with this guy, and his team. Yeah. So, so it's all about, building that rapport. And it's been critical to our success so far.
And so, well, two questions. I'll throw them at you at the same time. But how long have you been going after this, and just being dedicated to going out there every single month? That's kind of one side of it. But the other side is, how in the world, like, oh my goodness. People are starting, meetups are really a hot thing right now. Lots of people are starting their meetups in their backyard, basically, or within a 2-hour drive. You're on a plane. Like, I'm
on two planes. I'm on two planes because I fly to Arkansas, and Fayetteville, Arkansas is where I hold one meetup. Okay. The next morning, I'm up typically at 4:30 in the morning on another plane, because I'll hold another meetup in Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow.
So Monday night is one. Tuesday night is the second one.
And then it's a flight home.
Yes, and then the flight home. So yeah, so yeah, that's from two flights. So it is a challenge. Um, yeah. So no, Sorry, I jumped in there because
No,
but
I threw like two questions at the same time. So I'm like,
all right. Well, refresh. Sorry, I such great information. I kind of got all happy about the my second meetup.
no, well, I'm just like, what? I mean, that's a lot of jet setting. You got some good miles going on. Okay, so how long have you been dedicated? You've been
I,
doing this routine for how long?
since September of last year.
Okay. And have you noticed a significant, I mean, has that been helpful? I think you kind
Yeah, we're under contract for our second deal since December, and this will put us at I think something like 40 something units total between these two deals. I have approximately another 300 units worth of properties in my inbox that's going out to my underwriting team. Um, so yeah, so it has been very plus. Not only has the deal flow increased, but so has our investors. So I've had um, at least a half dozen or more from between the both meetups that have like, hey, I like what you're doing. I don't want to do what you're doing, but I want to invest in real estate. How can we invest with you? So, so it's building those relationships and stuff. So, and that's critical. I mean, it's one thing to find deals, but you also need the money to close.
of, yeah, oh gosh, that's miserable. Not like having a deal and no money. So that's not good at all. Now, starting a meetup in a completely different market that is hundreds of miles away. That might even, I mean, what is Jacksonville even 1,000? I mean, that's got to be 1,000 from, we can
Yeah,
be thousands.
it's like 12 or 1,300 miles from
That's
home.
okay. So, how do you even, how did you go about setting that up? Because I think there are other people where you're currently living. Here's what I'm thinking is that one reason I started a podcast was because I live in a very rural, remote area where even you're making me feel like a sissy. I'm like, gosh, I got to just go start a meetup down in Eastern Washington or something. But anyhow, it's like there are other strategies for people who live in areas where they might be remote. My strategy was, okay, I'm going to launch a podcast because I can connect, I can add value, and I love everyone I meet is amazing, and it's just been a really fun experience. But it's also, grows my knowledge, grows other people's knowledge, and we get how that goes. But the meetups are along the same lines. So you're taking this like, hey, I can live that principle, live where you want to live, invest where it makes sense. Like I'm living over here in this beautiful part of Colorado, seriously. And then I'm going to go fly to these other places. Like that's a cool strategy. But, and so I'm wondering, like, when you're setting that up from the distance.
So two things that have helped me out and my partner out with that is one is building relationships. So especially in Jacksonville, I actually have somebody that helps me co-host. That's their local and so that really helps. So they kind of set up the venue. I really just get out there. We collaborate on kind of what topic, and because he's still doing, excuse me, he's investing as well. So we'll talk about like a deal that he's closing on. So he'll so I mean it's a great way to be able to piggyback. The other thing we did is instead of trying to go out and market a meetup and stuff all by ourselves and doing it from scratch, we actually aligned ourselves with some other warriors from Rod Cleef's warrior group that are starting up their own nationwide network of meetups.
Oh.
So what's really nice with that is the marketing. So I don't have to go and you still have to do your own marketing, but I have help with that. I can post to the groups. I have other people that I can tag that aren't in my market, but may know folks within their sphere. Just like we were talking about earlier, you're like, hey, do you know so and so, in Steamboat? And I'm like, no, but if I had a meetup there, you posted this, or I tagged you in my marketing post, you can go, hey, go to this meetup, and then that's how, so that's kind of, so it's kind of like a grassroots type type piece. Plus, everyone shares on their, some of their slide decks. So instead of me trying to go, okay, what am I going to, go through? Because I can go through for ideas, and then I'll modify it to fit the needs of, my meetup. Because there's meetups out there that are way more advanced. They have a lot more folks going in, bigger markets, bigger investors. So they're way up here. So I'll take that same information and I'll just bring it down to, because a lot of my folks that come to my meetups are they're new. They're interested in them and into getting into real estate and they want to learn. So I just bring it back down to an understandable layman's terms, and we talk about it. So that's been a great help, because trying to run 2 meetups, do all the marketing, the lesson plans, if you will, or the slideshows, it can be overwhelming, because I also have a meetup that or not a meetup, excuse me, a mastermind group that I help host weekly, plus my travels, and then it's all about balance of family. So my wife is like, hey, you're on your phone again. So building those relationships, it allows me to do a lot of things, to be part of a lot of different things, but not all of it on my shoulders, and that's critical.
That's nice. I'm thinking how much your experience, you're 23 years in the Air Force. I mean, like, you can see just all this delegation and this teamwork and this collaboration.
Oh, I'm good at pointing my finger at times. Yeah, I get in there and get dirty myself.
No, exactly. I think my son's going to be really good at that too, because he's always getting people to do things for him. And I'm just like, well, there's a CEO in the making, or hopefully a great investor. That's really, I'm amazed. It's one thing when you read about people, and you're like, oh yeah, they have their meetup group or this or that, but I don't think everyone realizes the distance that you're going to make those things a reality, and the level of commitment that is for your market. And it definitely is paying off. Like, wow. So, I noticed that you have something that's closing, but it was a project, and it was a little vague. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot even wait to hear about this project that I see by the smile on your face. You're like, oh, the project. Can you tell us the story? What do we get to learn about this project?
No, I can tell a little bit. So yeah, we and again, like we talked about before, I'm in a hotel on my way back home after a week and a half on the road, but ended up visiting multiple markets, and then ended up the last 3 or 4 days of last week at our this 24 unit that we're looking at purchasing. So we're in the due diligence phase. We already have our investors, so I can talk a little bit. We're actually going to do a joint venture on this and not do a syndication, because it just makes more sense. It's a small enough deal. So yeah, so I don't have to worry about the whole SEC stuff. So I can talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, we're not going to get flagged and.
Right. Yeah. So no, it's in a excuse me, tertiary market. I actually found it as from a wholesaler. So it just goes back to building those relationships. Actually, let me take it back. I bought it through a wholesaler, but I got it through my connections. So there was a gentleman, Tim, can't remember his name. He had reached out to a mutual friend named Bethany Smith. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she lives in California. And he was like, hey, do you know anyone that's invested in Arkansas? And she's like, hey, Colby. Made the introduction. He's like, hey, I got this deal. It's not what, it doesn't meet our criteria, but the numbers look great. I wanted to pass this off. So I'm like, hey, thanks. So that I got this deal. And then we started looking into it, had my team underwrite it. We're like, wow, this is, it really, it falls into our wheelhouse. So yeah, so we went under contract, and it's, it needs some work. I'm kind of known as the guy that likes ugly properties. I think it kind of goes back to my fix and flip days of, I can kind of see it's like, yeah, this looks ugly now, but if we do a little bit here, we can make it, kind of see what we can turn it into.
Right.
yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to do with this one. It's we're still crunching the numbers. We're still not 100% committed on the deal yet. Just we're waiting on some construction quotes. We still have to make sure it pencils out.
Due
But as
diligence.
of right now, we like it. We want to go forward with it. But it's I learn a lot every time I do these deals. One is I appreciate where I live, but I feel humbled, and I appreciate kind of where certain segments of our population kind of come from. And and I'll tell you, I get a little frustrated with some investors and some landlords. So like I walked into this and it's just simple stuff. There's roaches and stuff. People are living in here, and I had one fall on me. That that
Oh my
that
God.
that was the first. That was a.
That's
I
so
think I screamed a little bit, but I think I kept it internal. Uh, but when we got done walking this thing, it's one of those where like I need to go take a shower. And a lot of it's not the people, because so I like telling this story because we bought just closed 2 months ago on a smaller property up in Fayetteville, and a B class property with like C minus tenants. Again, it was mismanaged. Um, this is a nice project too, because we're doing a rent bump once our renovations are done. We're increasing rents by $300 to $350 a unit. But all of the tenants up there, it was living in squalor,
Gosh.
and it was just real. It was rough. Um, this one here is the rents currently. We're not going to be able to bump them a lot, but it's on par. But even though these are smaller, it's in a poor part of town. Most of the units, you could tell there was pride. So even though these people, they don't have two nickels to rub together, they're on Section 8, yet they're still taking care of their place. I'm like, even though there's roaches, which that you can only do so much.
Right.
But I'd walk in, I was like, wow, this place is cute. They really take care of this.
Mm-hmm.
So it really, I don't, you have to have pride of ownership. So not just as a tenant, but also as as a as a real estate investor. And so that's kind of where I think our company shines, and why we like these older, uglier properties, is because my partner and I, it's not about the money. Yes, we need to pay the bills. Yes, my wife likes vacations and stuff, but it's not about the Maserati. It's not about all that. Our thing is still community. So because we donate 20% of our profits from our company back to charity. And big part of our thing is to help out with lower class workforce housing and homelessness. So that's another reason kind of why we're attracted to these other properties. They still make money. We can go in and really fix them up, get them under good management, um, and give these folks a better place to live. For the same price as the crappy house down the street, and still make a profit. Keep our investors happy.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens to people, especially somebody who already has a pride of ownership. That when the investors, when it's managed well, then you put those together, it changes lives. Like I really appreciate the heart behind what you got, your investment, the investor's heart, because I think there are a lot of landlords and investors and different people involved in providing housing, and it has this trickle effect that's really important to people. If you're happy and you feel safe and secure and you're in a nice environment, it changes your perspective and outlook on life. It's like the sky's not falling. I'm not going to die of coronavirus. Like I had to say that. Okay. But that's really, really awesome how you're going about that. One thing I love about interviewing different people is, so again, some of these things you don't get to unearth until you meet face to face, or you have a conversation like this. And it's like, man, that's so, like, what a great mission, what a great vision. And, like, what a gift to other people. Do you ever wonder, like, why are these people mismanaging them?
I think it's, I mean, it could be any number of reasons. I mean, honestly, and I think part of it is just it becomes laziness. They're they get so they've held on to these properties for such a long period of time that they start deferring the maintenance, and then they're that the cash flow from that property has been reallocated to say other projects, and they're not keeping anything aside. So then it's like, well, I don't have the money to put into this property to bring it up. So it creates that snowball effect, and that's a lot of the we're seeing a lot of deferred maintenance. This 24 unit, I think every unit had a roof leak or had a leak in the roof at one point. I think all but like 3 of them had big patches. And this property was built in 1965. And some of those patches look to be from like 1965. The roof is the original roof from 1965. And it's just like, put a little bit of preventive maintenance in it. And you can see if you take care of it, it's going to take care of you, and it's going to last a long time. And then the tenants, they're like, because we'd go through and they'd like have a leaky faucet, or there was one that had a roof leak, and we're like, hey, how, just I always ask, because I go through with the inspectors in their hip pocket. We're like best friends by the end of our inspection, because I'm looking over their shoulder. I walk in every unit with them. I'm seeing what they're seeing, and I get it firsthand of any discrepancy. So I don't have to wait on the report. I already know what's in the report before I get it. But I'll talk to the tenants that are there. Be like, hey, how long have you lived here? Have you had any, issues and stuff? And I'm like, hey, how long has the roof been leaking right there? And they're like, well, over a year. I'm like, well, okay, did you tell anybody? And they're like, we don't know who to contact.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, a lot of that, so it's like, come on, just give them, the contact information.
Right.
So they can put it, now, and then I also take that with a grain of salt, because they could have been given all that information, and people are people, and, stuff gets lost. But
somewhere that got coffee.
Well, but going around and talking with the tenants, I think it's true, because, I got a lot of the same answers of, well, we don't know who to contact or how to get, it's changed. The previous owners were great, but the current owner, we don't, when it changed over, we feel left in the dark. We used to get monthly pest control. Now we don't get anything. So, so those are actually key things that I like to find, because if it's mismanaged, getting new managers in there, managing it properly, that in itself is going to increase your tenant happiness. And then if they know who to call, and you really enforce hey, we're going to do inspections, say quarterly or every 6 months, please don't tell us then, tell us when these are happening, call this number. You're going to catch things a lot sooner, instead of having, ceilings cave in, which I guess happened in one of the units too. So, but I like seeing that, because I look at that as, a lot of people would walk into this 24 unit and be like, I ain't buying. But I look at it as it's opportunity. Another thing we pointed out we found in the underwriting is the water bill was high. So we started asking why.
Right.
And so they're not doing rubs. It's all built back in, or it's all included in the rent. Well, couldn't get an answer from the seller. Well, I know why, because nobody goes to the property. But walk into units, there's at least a dozen faucets that were dripping, toilets, so, and then like original, like 1980s shower heads. So they're all high flow, older toilets that are, like 5 gallons per flush. So it's like, wow, we could just go in, buy bulk, because these are smaller units, put in new faucets, new fixtures, and probably cut the water bill in half, which goes straight to your NOI.
I just have to say, this is actually like a dream property to find, it's like, when it's cosmetic and it's something that you can fix and you can see it, and you and I know it's not we have to fix this thing every single year. You fix the roof, you're done for, an extended period of time. You put in new faucets, you put in new shower heads, you're good for that'll go the distance, and you're going to make, oh gosh, the
Yeah,
return.
your ROI on faucets and toilets. I mean, it's like, oh crap, this is gonna be like, we haven't quoted it out yet, but I'm like, it's $5,000. Oh my God, that's a lot of money. But if you think about it, you're not gonna have to do anything for 10 years, potentially, as long as it's taken care of, or minimal. You're probably gonna, that $5,000 in savings, we're in probably 18 months. We figure, and I say 5,000, but honestly, if it costs us, which it's not going to cost us 5,000, but we cut our water bill in half, 18 months, we've made up that $5,000.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to cost us a lot less to do what we want to do in that aspect, which means, 12 months or less, that it's an investment, that's a return, that's now it's positive cash flow after that.
Yeah. It's that long-term vision. You have it. You have that long-term vision. You're flying out to markets, building relationships that aren't just, one-sided. I'm going to have this relationship for 5 minutes while it works for me and I get what I want. Like you're digging deep. Love it. It's so cool.
The broker for the property, he represented the seller. I still talk to him. Yeah, and he's made like 4 other introductions.
Oh my, wow.
Because he liked just having that, even though we were
on
opposite ends, I built a great, we were easy to work with, we were professional. We said what we were going to do, but more importantly is we did what we said.
Oh gosh.
And we did have a hiccup on the closing, but it wasn't my fault or my team's fault. It was the lenders. They goofed up and ordered the appraisal like the week before because they forgot.
Oh,
which cost me a lot of money. It was a whole, there's a lot of stress that last week and a half, but we made it to closing, and the broker was like, he knew it wasn't our doing, it was outside of my control. So that's what helped save the relationship. And like I said, he's made introductions to other lenders, other brokers within his office. So it's been great, so I think just that right there, that's going to make us some money in the future.
Yeah, that definitely will. There's this concept. I come from a residential real estate background before I made this transition into multifamily. And there's this concept of the orphaned buyer. So in a sense, it's basically this concept that even if you are, not representing the buyer of a property, as soon as they buy that property, you add them into your database, because most people they neglect, they have a single-ended transaction. Great, I sold you a house, see you later, adios, and so you adopt them basically and say, okay, and I'm going to add you. So you're kind of using that same concept with, this, it's actually genius, like, hey, I'm going to keep good rapport with all of the brokers, no matter which side they're on.
Yeah, and I tell everyone in my meetups, and because as it being in especially multifamily, it's a team sport. There's that old adage, you can go fast alone, but you go further together. And and I kind of stress that at these meetups. I'm like, listen, when you're dealing with buyers and sellers and brokers and all this other thing, I'm like, and I said, even other people, I said, everyone in this room, I said, I don't look at anybody in my market as doing what I'm doing as a competitor.
Yeah.
I look at them as a future partner. We may be, on a deal, opposite ends of a deal, but if I can get in with that other competitor, be like, hey, what are you looking for? And it's a synergy of effort. Because if we're both like-minded, hence why I have multiple partners out there. I have one main partner, my company, Veteran Private Investment Group. Rob and I run it. But we're partnered with, 3 or 4 other investors like ourselves. And it's a synergy of effort. We can do larger deals. We're all in the same sheet, so that's all it's all about helping each other out.
It is, I've heard this repeatedly, this happens so often. And I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about being in this niche is, people, you got to play nice. You're not going to play nice, in the sandbox. It's going to come back to bite you. And but but playing nice is just better anyhow, but I've seen a lot of people come together and form, partnerships just because they're like, they were competing in the same market. It's like, why are we competing? We both want this. Let's make this happen and we can go about it together and,
Right.
up our odds of getting this. So
Yeah.
that is so cool. I am going to, is there anything else that I really am a talker. I could like talk and listen because I love learning. So I'm like, I could go on and there are actually other questions. I'm like, ooh, what about that? But I want to honor your time and everything. Is there anything else that you would be like, man, I wish I would have known back at the beginning, or this is something, any other final gems you'd like to drop on it on our audience?
Yes. And you may have heard this before. I think, and it's been critical to our success, is finding out what your why is. Why are you doing this? And if it's materialistic, I mean, and honestly, that's fine. But you have to have a deeper meaning, so I go to a bunch of conferences, my partner and I, and we run into the folks that are like, yeah, I want the Maserati, I want, this, the boat and stuff like that. Well, what's interesting is a year later, those same folks, you never see them or hear from them again. But the folks that are in it that have a bigger why, like ours is, we want to help veteran homelessness through real estate. So we want to, through our donations, we started a nonprofit recently on top of everything else we've got going on. And and I think that's why we become so successful, is because it shows. It's, to us, it's not about the money. It's about taking care of our investors, taking care of our tenants, and being part of something bigger than yourself. And I think that's, most veterans out there kind of already have that understanding, because we did that when we served our country. We definitely didn't do it for the paycheck. We might have done it for school or rather originally, but us that stayed in, and like I said, I retired after 23 years. I did it because it was a higher calling. And so we're trying to take that and put it into our company, and it shows. And because last year, we were talking, we went from, we acquired over 500 doors
That
in
is
12 months.
phenomenal. Like,
And it's building partnerships, and it's the trustworthiness. It's because, our why shows through, our passion for what we're doing. And it's, again, it's not about the dollar. I'm not like, oh my God, what's my percentage and stuff. I'm like, cool. Long as it's fair. Are you happy with that? I'm happy. We're all making money. Cool. All right, we're good. It's not the greediness,
yeah.
So, and so that'd be the biggest thing, is find out what your why. And yeah, and if you love real estate but you don't want to get into it, call me. I'll do all the legwork. Just give me the money.
He's
We'll
already doing
invest
the
wisely.
legwork. He's got the markets and the cash flow. But it's totally true. Yeah, that's my grandfather and then my father, they both always taught in residential real estate, but it applies, it's that same philosophy you're saying is, you got to look far beyond. And they always said, you don't look after your commission. You take care of your clients, you take care of what you're doing, you put everything else first, and it will all fall into place. But it's also, that amen to the why. If you don't know why you're doing something, you fizzle out because it gets hard. You hit the wall and then you want to quit, and you have to know, no, I'm not quitting. Here's why. When you're helping, homeless veterans, and you can see that you get to give a drop, help out with that, and you're helping your family. I mean, so much bigger.
And that's what's, there's been so many days that I'm like, I just want to quit. Is it worth it? Am I doing the right thing? You just, like you said, it just, you just, nothing seems to be going right. And then it's just like, okay, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this because when we become successful, we're going to meet our goals and we're going to be helping other people, and I'm just like, all right, I'll get through the next day. And, and I think it's funny because it's kind of seems like it's feast or famine. And we're getting better with our whole deal flow and building those relationships. But there's a lot of times where it may go a week or two where it's like crickets. nothing. And then it's like, that's when I really start getting in my own head and like, okay, what are we doing wrong? What do we need to do? And then all of a sudden, and it's typically after I do a trip, um, and re-engage in those relationships, that it's like we have more work on my desk than we know what to do with. Yeah, more deals. We're like, okay, we had to pump the brakes just a little bit. Let's get these prioritized, because it's one thing to put LOIs out. It's another thing though, is if you have multiple ones out and like 3 or 4 of them get accepted at the same time, because then it's like, oh crap, now what do I do? This doesn't usually happen, and knock on wood, that hasn't happened, but we've had 2 at the same time. Um, One ended up not panning out, but it's like, oh crap, okay, now I got to do like 4 times as work, because it's not twice as much; it's like 4 times as much work.
It, definitely. What is, I really like how you thank you for, just letting us know how sometimes it gets in your head, because every person faces that, and we have to have our strength, our wow, our mindset. I'm like, I just lost words apparently. But I mean, just trying to figure out, how did you figure out how to get yourself out of your head? Like, what are some of the strategies that you use just to reshift and refocus so that you're not staying in basically a negative state?
Yeah, it's you have to surround yourself with like-minded people. The mastermind group. I started that more as an accountability group. Because like I said, Rob and I, we go to conferences quarterly. And while you're there, it's like you're re-energized, you're around, hundreds of people that are doing the same thing. Then you go home. And it's like, when I talk to my wife about it, she kind of gets glassy eyed and is like, uh-huh, and then, so, you can kind of lose that steam. So that's where is to keep myself motivated. I'm like, I need to have constant interaction with not just positive, but people I can bounce ideas, I can vent to, that have that understand. And then that's what's great. So every Sunday we all get together. We're all from across the nation. And, if you're having a bad day, you vent and everyone's like, okay, you get out of your head. This is bad. Here's what you can do. And that's been helpful. And, in going and, I have several mentors. We even paid for coaching. And and again, it's, people are like, oh, that costs a lot of money. Yeah. But I wouldn't be where I'm at today if we didn't spend money. So it's kind of the way you have to spend a little money. And if you spend money to educate yourself and to improve your mindset and how you're doing it, the return on investment is just exponential. I read, um, I listen more because of traveling. But I listen to Audible. Last year, I think I listened to over 50 something books. And then I find one I like. After I listen to it like 2 or 3 times, I'll buy it, and then I'll start highlighting and stuff. But self-help books. I think that's kind of the mindset. Like Grant Cardone, he can be a little over the top.
Oh my gosh, I love his books.
They're great. I like, there's really great nuggets. It's just, and it helps. It helps to go, okay, I can be positive. I can, and I say yes. So instead of going, oh, I can't do that, I'm like, well, first time we raised money, someone came and was like, hey, we have this deal. We're bringing in as a GP. Think you can raise money?
Mm-hmm.
No idea. Never done it before. So I'm like, well, I'm going to say yes and figure it out. And I learned a lot. So it wasn't, because I had this discussion. My people that say they're realist, I honestly, I just think they're pessimists in denial. Because you have to have a positive mindset. Now, positive doesn't mean reckless, and that's a part of the discussion, because a lot of people are like, oh, you're so positive, you say yes and blah blah blah. I'm like, yes, but I don't just, I'm not gonna go and go, you know what, I'm gonna go and put an LOI in on a 1,000-unit portfolio. All right, I want to, I'm going to, I'm gonna do it. It's just gonna take me a minute to get there. And then how am I going to build myself up? So it's like, I know what our comfort zone is, and I keep pushing it outside of that. And that's been a huge help, is you got to keep moving forward, say you can do it. If you have any self-doubt, you're going to fail. And what's the quote? Henry Ford, I think, said, if you think you can, or you think you can't, you're correct.
It's so true. Grant Cardone had a book, and it was the first book I ever read of his, and it was Sell or Be Sold. And it has that concept, like, man, if you're not sold out on whatever it is that you believe in, I mean, he was talking about if you're not sold out on your spouse, if you're not sold, like, whatever it is, you always have to go back to your why. You got to resell yourself on what your commitment is, and then go after it. But to just continue, like you're saying, just continually push.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so many good gems. So many good gems. Thanks so much, Colby. It was so great having you on the podcast. For all of the listeners, just a reminder that, man, our guests are fantastic over here at Ask Me How I Know. So make sure that you check out. I'm going to drop links in the show notes, because if we say them, you're out there driving or whatever. So we're not going to cause car wrecks. And we're going to drop little hyperlinks to make it easy for you to go and check out what Colby's doing. Check out all the little things that he's involved with, because they're so amazing. It'll give you Facebook links and links to, like, his email address will be in there. I think we decided, right? So everything that you would want is going to be there, and probably more. So make sure you check that out, show him some love, and, you might want to invest with him. You could just sit back and say, hey, Colby, what do you got going on? What's my IRR on that one?
And also for I love talking to people and helping folks out. So if they even just want to reach out to me, email, or they have a question, how did we get started? Some questions I get from veterans is, well, how did you go from being in the military to real estate? Because there's no job correlation there, so I like talking to people and explaining our story, because, literally 2 years ago, I was probably where most of your listeners were at, going, how do I do this? I want to get into real estate, but I don't know how. And it's really not that hard. Now, it's not for everybody, but, reach out. I will not, I answer my own emails. I don't have an assistant. We're not that big yet, but I will love to jump on a phone call with anybody, talking real estate, talking their market. How do we get in our markets? Anything that if I can provide value to them, I'd be more than happy to help any of your listeners out.
That is so awesome. And I'll let you know, I've definitely, over the last couple of years, I've definitely made phone calls to people off podcasts. And that's the way this multifamily world is. This community is so generous and so giving. So don't hesitate. He doesn't bite. Don't hesitate to call Colby and, pick his brain a little bit and get encouraged, because like he's saying, like, I really believe every decision to your freedom is just your freedom is one decision away. And so you are in control of that. So whatever decision you make, really think about it and say, hey, I can make one decision and another and another and another, and then you're going to be in the freedom space that you want to be. All right, go find your freedom, people. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of Ask Me How I Know. My guests are the most humble successes, so be sure to show them your appreciation by rating this episode 5 stars, which sounds silly, but let's be real. Ratings, likes, and shares, they take no time at all, but make all the difference in the world, if only to boost morale. Also, since I don't spend time on the how and why they got into investing, be sure to check out the show notes to get to know more about today's guests, including other podcasts they've been on that has a more traditional format that will give other details about their investment journey. It'll also tell you things like the most influential person in their life and what they're reading right now, as well as how to connect with them. And please subscribe and rate Ask Me How I Know so it reaches other listeners like you. Until next time, go find your freedom.